Movies of 1999.
Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to episode 10 of the Movies of 1999. It's a podcast where we watch a movie from 1999 each week as selected by a bingo machine. My name is Jason Hutchins.
And my name is Craig Talbot.
And in this episode, we're going to be talking about The Talented Mr. Ripley and Hideous Kinky, which are the two movies that we watched last week. And tune in at the end of the episode when we'll be crossing live to this week's movie night, where we'll be selecting a ball from the bingo machine to find out what we'll be talking about on next week's show. So how are you doing this week, Craig?
Yeah, very good. Congratulations on reaching the 10th episode, Jason. I think that's
double digits.
Pretty big. So cheers on that one. Well done.
Cheers, yes. I've just got my coffee handy.
I saw that. So that's a pretty big milestone to hit, 10 episodes. So yeah,
it is,
good effort.
But for me, it's really the 13th episode that will be the big one, because that's the first quarter of the year. Like, if we can get quarter one done and dusted, then I think we're doing really well.
I think the only thing I'm finding after the 10th episode is trying to remember what movie we're watching every week. My brain is starting to get a bit confused. But,
I know, there's so many movies and some very esoteric movies among them. Two movies this week, The Talented Mr. Ripley and Hideous Kinky. I should first start by explaining why I selected The Talented Mr. Ripley. Why would that have been in my A-list? And it's a movie I watched at the time. I didn't remember too many details about it, but I did remember it sort of making a bit of an impact on me when I saw it. So it was a natural one to add to the list, especially when you have a look at some of the reviews that people have given it. But can you guess why that was matched with Hideous Kinky?
I do actually have a theory on this one.
Right.
I'd
like to know because I'm not sure myself.
Face. Yeah, no, I do have a little bit of a theory on this one. They're both based on novels, actually.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Novels by female authors.
Oh, there you go. Even better. Yeah.
Just in time for International Women's Day on Wednesday.
Yesterday. Good job. Yeah. No, I did notice that. I noticed they were both by female authors and both very interesting books, actually. Just going back to the actual movie night, I think this was the one that had the biggest reaction from everyone. Do you agree?
Huge reaction. And like at least some of the people hadn't seen it before. And I don't think many of us remembered a lot of the plot details. But when the movie ended, everyone wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, which is the first time that's really happened where there was actually a bit of back and forth about this movie, like what actually happened, what actually, what it all meant. And I found that really interesting. So this one actually really did get the juices flowing as far as the interest of the crowd, if you like.
It certainly did. And we'll go into talking about that soon. I've just got to read my little synopsis first. But before I did that, new segment, twin spotting. A little homage to Train Spotting, maybe, but twin spotting. Did you spot any twins? Because I think this must be, we've had 5 in a row or something.
I don't think there was any there might have been some twins in Hideous Kinky, actually. But I'm not sure about The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Weren't there 2 Italian opera singer guys or something that you thought?
The priests. Actually, they were twins. If they weren't twins, they were really, really close to twins. They looked identical.
Well, maybe they're just brothers.
They could be brothers, yeah. No, the 2 priests that were singing in The Talented Mr. Ripley.
So you didn't get to the bottom of that?
I only just remember that then, to be honest.
Right. I wonder if they were twins. Anyway, the big surprise was the numbers, because it was number 33. So we had the twin digits again. So when we cross to the movie night tonight, if number 22 comes out...
Yeah, or 11.
I'm buying a lotto ticket. Or 11, yeah. Well, let me dive into reading the synopsis for The Talented Mr. Ripley, and then we can start discussing it in earnest. So, The Talented Mr. Ripley is a gripping psychological thriller set in the sun-drenched elegance of 1950s Italy. The story follows the enigmatic Tom Ripley, a young underachiever with a talent for mimicry, persuasion and deceit. Sent to Italy to persuade the wealthy and carefree playboy Dickie Greenleaf to return to America, Ripley becomes obsessed with Dickie's lavish lifestyle. As his lies spiral out of control, Ripley's desperation leads to a dark path of manipulation, identity theft, and murder, revealing the chilly extremes he will go to in order to belong to a world that's always been out of his reach. This film weaves a captivating tale of intrigue, seduction, and the dangerous allure of living someone else's life. So thanks, ChatGPT, but you didn't mention any of the actors. So shall we go through the main leads?
Okay, so Matt Damon is the title role of Tom Ripley in this movie. I have to say this is probably the best performance I think I've ever seen from him in a movie.
Yeah, I would agree.
Excellent performance. Gwyneth Paltrow as Marge, probably again the best performance I've seen from her. Never really rated her particularly highly as an actress personally, but
same.
She does brilliantly in this. Jude Law won several awards for his portrayal of Dickie. He won a supporting actors BAFTA and a number of other
And he's really
awards.
perfectly cast in that role as well, I think.
Apparently he didn't want to do this movie because he didn't want to be seen as a pretty boy. But then he changed his mind when he saw who else was on the movie and decided to join the cast. I'm rapidly turning into a Cate Blanchett fan, and her job on this movie as Marge was excellent.
It's a very pivotal role. She's not in it for very much screen time, but...
And I actually enjoyed the performance of Philip Seymour Hoffman.
He's
who
always
is often
great.
a sort of character actor off to the side, and he plays a guy called Freddie. And there was a whole bunch of other people in this movie.
Yeah, Jack Davenport from This Life, I remembered. Philip Baker Hall.
Some great actors in this movie. But I honestly feel if this is not Matt Damon's best movie, then it's not far off. He did a really good job in this movie.
Yeah, wonderful.
So this was directed by Anthony Minghella, and he's actually responsible for The English Patient and also Truly, Madly, Deeply, and a whole host of other movies. So a very highly decorated director. Obviously, the screenplay is by Patricia Highsmith, and Anthony Minghella actually was the one that adapted it to a screenplay.
Oh, okay.
Actually, really enjoyed the music in this movie. Thought it was really
because it was a lot of jazz, wasn't it? And our mate Rob, who likes a bit of jazz, was.
Oh, is that right?
No, he's the exact opposite. He thinks.
Oh, is he? Right. Okay.
He's kind of like Ripley's father, thinking that it's just a cacophony of noise or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I actually really. I'm not a jazz fan, but I really enjoyed the music in this movie, and that's done by a guy called Gabriel Yared, and I thought the cinematography by John Seal was excellent.
Yeah, really, really good. The setting of 1950s Italy was so important to this movie, and I think I commented it was a bit like the TV show White Lotus. There's all these very privileged Americans who are on vacation in another country, and all sorts of intrigue and murder and things unfold.
Yeah, and behaving pretty badly.
And also very fashionable. Some of their, like the way they dress, they're all beautiful, well-dressed people.
Yeah. So it rates a 85% on Rotten Tomatoes and 80% score by viewers. And it made over $128 million, but apparently on initial release it struggled a little bit, but then has subsequently, like we've said about a lot of these movies that we've watched, has gained a bit of cult following over time, and now is considered a bit of a classic. I think deservedly so.
Is that because it took a dark turn? You know, the movie begins with some narration by Matt Damon, and he says something like, "It all started when I decided to wear the jacket, and if I'd never done that, then none of this would have happened." And it sort of sets you up for what's going to come. You know that there's going to be some sort of twist. But apparently they only added that after the test screening. You know, the scene when they're on the boat together and he kills Dickie.
Oh, okay. Right.
The audiences were shocked and completely put off and just hated the movie. And they had to go back and add in that initial narration to set up the story. And I was just wondering why, if there was a slow burn initially, maybe it's because audiences weren't prepared for that dark turn.
Maybe 1999 audiences. I think this movie is a movie that has aged well. Unlike a lot of the other movies that we've talked about, this one has aged well. It's as good today as it was then.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It could have been made this year and you wouldn't blink an eye, really.
I was interested to note there are actually 4 other novels about Tom Ripley that came out after the original one, and 2 of them have been turned into movies. Jude Law had to learn to play the saxophone, and Gwyneth Paltrow learned to play the piano for their roles in this movie. The movie was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Supporting Actor for Jude Law, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, and Best Original Music Score. It unfortunately did not win any of those, but it was nominated for something like 81 different awards. It did win some minor awards, but and a BAFTA, which is probably the biggest award that it won.
Yep.
As you mentioned, Jason, it was filmed in a lot of beautiful locations, including Rome, Venice, and a little town called Ischia, which is where most of the movie is based. Anthony Minghella actually sent Jude Law to Ischia early so that he could go learn how to sail and get a bit of a suntan, because apparently he was a bit too pale for the movie. They really were trying to capture that 1950s feel with the
Yeah,
locations.
I think they did that quite well. I was just looking up at John Seal, the cinematographer, because I recognise the name, but he's the guy that was pulled out of retirement to do Mad Max Fury Road. He's a Queenslander.
So it's interesting. Australians get around a bit.
They certainly do. But if you've ever travelled, you'll realise how many Australians are living and working overseas.
So originally, Anthony Minghella actually wanted Tom Cruise to play Ripley, which I think would have made it a much different movie.
Yeah. No,
but after he watched Matt Damon's, I guess, breakout film Good Will Hunting, he decided that Matt was the man for this movie. And I think it's a brilliant piece of casting. I think he was perfect for this movie. He has that boyish charm.
Yeah, definitely.
But also that dark side, you know. I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah, of course. Of course. The Room is one of the most fantastic, what do you call them, these movies that are so bad that they're good? They get a cult following. But
right.
Yeah, I've seen The Room quite a few times.
Okay, well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because on viewing this film, Tommy Wiseau was so emotionally moved that he vowed to make a film just as, if not more compelling. So that film was The Room.
Well, there's a whole fictionalized movie about the making of The Room as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, The Room's nothing like The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Interestingly, I thought this was an interesting little aside. Much of the film is shot upon or next to water, but apparently the character of Tom Ripley is terrified of the water. And so you do actually notice this in the film, but I didn't actually understand it completely. So during the beach scene where Tom meets Dickie, he only enters the sea for a second, then immediately turns back to the beach. He refuses to join them in the water when they're on the sailing boat. And then there's the hired motorboat scene, obviously. And as Dickie begins to rock the boat back and forth, Tom obviously gets pretty terrified of the boat capsizing. For the benefit of my friends who like the classics, there's a section in the movie where Shakespeare's Macbeth is probably quite cleverly inserted, because, you know, it's a bit of a Macbethian style movie in a sense. There's scene 4 of Shakespeare's Macbeth, the Prince of Cumberland, is actually written out. There's a handwriting analysis thing that Tom gets Dickie to do.
Yep.
And so that's actually from Shakespeare. And there's a little artistic aside. There's apparently a very famous photograph called Naples, Italy, 1960 by a guy called Henri Cartier-Bresson, which is recreated in the movie. There's a man sitting on another man's lap in Rome.
I feel like that's an Easter egg that very few members of the audience would have appreciated.
Yeah, but anyway, it's there. There's a lot of factoids and interesting information about this movie. I could have gone on for ages.
Did you look into the author Patricia Highsmith at all? Because
no, I didn't. No.
Oh, well, she's a very strange woman.
Right, okay.
I read up a little bit about her. She wrote a series of books about Thomas Ripley. I think there's maybe 5 in the series, and there's an adaptation coming to Netflix. They've turned it into a TV show called Ripley.
Oh, okay.
So it's quite interesting that 25 years later, we've rediscovered this movie and there's a TV show about to come out. A lot of people think that she was quite an evil person. She was a bit of a misogynist.
Right.
Which is strange. People think she was probably a lesbian, but she is also a bit of a woman hater. She really supported the Palestinians' independence, which is quite topical these days, but she supported it to the extent that she became quite anti-Semitic and said some horrible things about Jewish people. So she's quite a controversial figure, and you'd almost say these days that she's probably worth being cancelled.
She apparently liked to make furniture.
Well, she's cancelled.
How dare she? How dare she like furniture? Yeah, I didn't know very much about her at all. But
no, I didn't know anything about her, but it was interesting.
The story is a very good one, so we'll give it that. I know you don't approve of actors singing on their movies, Jason, but I thought you'd like to know that Matt Damon actually did sing the song My Funny Valentine in the movie. And Jude Law also, as you know, did some singing in the movie as well. So I think they both did a very good job.
That was a very pivotal moment when he was singing My Funny Valentine. Jude Law's lip syncing was spot on, I thought.
Yeah.
And Matt Damon as well. It's really hard to do when you're making a movie. Even if they sung the song themselves, they've still got to lip sync it when they're performing it. And they do it really well.
Genuinely, the performances from everyone in this movie, it's the first time I've seen Gwyneth Paltrow and I've actually liked her in a role. There's something about her.
I would totally agree with that. Yeah, I've never really been a Gwyneth Paltrow fan at all.
I often see Gwyneth Paltrow and wonder why she's there. You know, I've seen her in a few movies and never really warmed to her as an actress.
No.
I think she did really, really well. And it was really interesting seeing Cate Blanchett and her on the screen, if not simultaneously, at least in the same movie. Interesting that, because, it's remarkable how similar the two are in their look. Well, certainly in this movie, the look is very similar. Cate Blanchett, for me, I'm going to go for the Aussie and say she's a much more talented actress in my,
for sure.
in my mind.
And like you said last week, that she did 6 movies in 1999.
I'm pretty sure between 1998 and 1999, she did about 6 or 7 movies.
So busy, but her performance in this movie is so different to the one that she was in Pushing Tin.
Yeah, completely different character.
She can just go into these characters and, different accents and everything,
Yeah, and it's worth remembering she had just finished playing Elizabeth only a few months earlier. Very different. How she keeps it all straight in her head is beyond me, but there you go. So I found that really, really interesting. That was probably the most thought-provoking movie, I suspect.
I mean, Ripley is he's a bit of a psychopath, and he's all about himself, even killing the people that he's fallen in love with so that he doesn't get caught or so that he can continue living this lifestyle. It's like the lifestyle is more important than anything else.
And this is one of the things I know I said about other movies, his character remains likeable all the way through.
That's right.
You sort of still want to watch him. Like, even at the end, after all the horrible things he's done, you're like, oh, gee, I wonder what happened to him. It's like... You still kind of liked his character, and I think that's a testament to Matt Damon's acting in this movie. He does an excellent job.
And I think the author, Patricia Highsmith, said that was her intent when creating this character, to take someone who by all means should be very unlikable and make them the likable protagonist of the story. And it's very much what they did with Breaking Bad, where the main character is quite a nasty person. But the audience keeps on, rooting for them and wanting them to win. And ultimately he does win, doesn't he? I mean, Ripley gets away with it in the end, even though he's killed 2 people that he's in love with.
It kind of fades to black at that point, and you're not quite sure what's going to happen next. Somehow he gets out of this and goes on to the next, I guess you'd call it, adventure of his. Genuinely really interesting movie, and I was fascinated to see the debate after the movie night. It was really interesting that everyone had a different opinion of how things happened and where things happened. And, I had some fairly strong opinions and other people had some fairly strong opinions about it. Some
people even argued that everything he did was in self-defense.
Yeah, interesting. So
I think that's stretching it a little bit, I think.
I think that is stretching it a little bit. I don't quite buy that. I do think he's a pretty evil character. I think, again, it's probably a thing that fits better with our sensibilities now than it might have done in 1999. I think if some people had walked into this movie not having seen the trailer or anything like that, and then you saw this beautiful Italian kind of love story movie, which it is for a bit, and then all of a sudden everything starts to go wrong.
Yes.
There's all these quite bloody scenes in the boat and all that kind of stuff. And, people start dying. And,
I think we were all quite shocked during the boat scene. So that was The Talented Mr. Ripley. And before we move on into the second movie that we watched, Hideous Kinky, Craig, I think you watched another movie from 1999 during the week.
I did.
So do you want to talk about that?
I'm proposing a new segment here, Jason, and I'm calling it the interlude.
The interlude.
I'm putting it out there. I'm calling it the interlude. We'll see what the audience thinks about that. I watched this really charming little movie during the week from a director from Bhutan about a group of Tibetan monks, and it's set in India because, unfortunately, as people may know, the Chinese have treated the Tibetans pretty badly, so a lot of the religious members of Tibetan monk community have had to move to northern India. The Dalai Lama lives in northern India, and so it was actually directed by a guy, Khyentse Norbu, and he's from Bhutan. He's actually a lama, which is a high priest in their system. He's actually considered to be the reincarnation of a saint from the 19th century. So when he travels through northern India or Bhutan, he's often revered by the people, and he actually finds that quite irritating. He actually went to film school in New York and then became a lama later on. So he's actually a really, really interesting little story there. But The Cup, getting back to that, it's a really charming and humorous film that is about the passion that some young Tibetan monks have for soccer. And it's set during the 1998 World Cup in France. Now, I know you're not a massive sports follower, Jason, but I'm a huge lover of the World Cup. So that was one of the reasons why I watched this movie.
Right.
And I just found it really fascinating. It's got quite a strong Australian connection and a British connection. It has a lot of Australian crew and production team. A lot of the post-production, in fact, all of the post-production was done in Australia. It's based around the arrival of 2 Tibetan refugees who were sent to this monastery in India. And they spend their day in prayer, and it's all serene and it's all lovely, and it's kind of disrupted by this soccer fever. And there's some really fascinating and lovely scenes of what Tibetan monastery life is like. I found it absolutely fascinating, man. But anyway, it's quite a funny little movie. It's got a lot of humor in it. It's actually interesting because it's actually a true story. I'm pretty sure that the guy who plays Gecko, the enforcer monk in the story, it's actually about him. So him as a child. So there's a little boy who plays him as a child, who plays, I think it's Oryen, and he actually stars in the movie. Anyway, these boys, they want to watch the World Cup, and so they sneak out of the monastery at night to go and watch the World Cup in the village because there's, not very many people with a TV, so there are lots of people gathering around in one house that has a TV. Stuff sort of happens and they get kicked out of that, and then they get into trouble with the abbot and with Gecko for leaving the monastery at night. And so they put on punishment. They have to cook in the kitchens for a month. Oryen, the little boy character, comes up with this idea of hiring a TV set so that they can watch the World Cup final, which in this particular year was between France and Brazil. They go through this whole process of trying to rent the TV set for the monastery. It's actually really lovely little movie. There's some really interesting little sections where the Lama of the movie, who is the head of the monastery, he's sort of contemplating the difference between his life in Tibet and his life as a Tibetan monk, and the fact that the world is changing so much around him, and he wonders what's going to happen to all these young boys as they go through life trying to be a Tibetan monk in the modern world. It's the first time he's ever watched TV in his life. He watches the World Cup final between France and Brazil, and he really wants to go home. He has all his stuff packed because he wants to go home and to Tibet. And yeah, it's just a really lovely movie. They get to watch the World Cup final, but Oryen has a few moments of sadness because he does some fairly dodgy stuff to get enough money to rent this TV and the satellite dish that goes with it. The whole movie is just very, very fascinating, and I highly recommend it to our listeners. Got 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. As I said, it has quite a strong Australian connection as well.
Yeah, I can see on Letterboxd that David and Margaret reviewed it and both gave it 4 stars. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. I didn't know that. So there you go. It's a really lovely movie. It's available online. I managed to watch it online on a service called BitChute. And yeah, really, really, really great movie. Probably one of the loveliest movies I've watched this year.
When I was putting this project together, I really limited myself to just Hollywood movies and a scattering of Australian movies pretty much. But there's a lot of really good foreign cinema in 1999 as well. It would be nice to learn about some of those movies as the year goes on.
Yeah, as the year goes on, perhaps we can chuck in a few more of the really famous. There's probably at least 4 or 5 other really famous foreign films. All of the actors in this movie were actually non-professional. They were actually monks and others. So this was his first directed film, Kayetse Nobu, and he's gone on to do quite a number of other movies. It was the very first movie from Bhutan to be included in the Academy Awards.
Good stuff. Thanks for that overview, and I'll add it to my list of movies to watch.
Yeah, so interesting.
And a little bit autobiographical by the sounds of it as well.
The main Gecko Organ Tobyao, it's about his life. Yeah. So Kayetse Nobu, interestingly, he still continues to be a lama, a religious figure, and so he strides these two worlds between directing films and being on set. And apparently, filming quite often gets interrupted because people will come up to him and ask him for a blessing, so they have to stop filming while these people do that. And then he goes back to his, as he calls it, his change of life. He switches lives. Yeah. Anyway, there you go.
Well, there you go. That was The Cup, our little interlude for this week. And now we'll move on to Hideous Kinky, speaking of autobiographical tales. Hideous Kinky is a captivating drama set in the colourful and chaotic backdrop of 1970s Morocco. The film follows the adventurous journey of a young British woman, played by Kate Winslet, and her two daughters as they seek spiritual and cultural enlightenment far from the conventional boundaries of their home in London. Escaping the dull routine and expectation of Western life, they embark on an unconventional journey of discovery and freedom. Along the way, they encounter a variety of characters, including a street acrobat who changes their lives in unexpected ways. Hideous Kinky is a story of love, freedom, and the search for identity, beautifully capturing the essence of its Moroccan setting and the complexities of motherhood and personal growth. So, I remember this movie from back in 1999 just because of the weird title.
Right.
And it must have been on movie posters at some of the art house cinemas in Perth, I think. Because that title just stuck in my head. I'd never seen it before. Craig, what did you think of Hideous Kinky?
I think this is another attempt by Kate Winslet to do something different after having done Titanic. Apparently, she really struggled with the fame that came along with the Titanic experience. And so she actually went off to film this movie while most of the publicity and attention was on Titanic at the time.
Right.
So late 1997, early 1998. I actually read a quote by her saying she deliberately did all these really weird little movies because she wanted to get away from the fame. So she ran away to Morocco and she ran away to Australia in Holy Smoke,
yeah.
Yeah. So she was kind of like trying to get away from the fame and stuff that came along with Titanic. It's not about. I think this movie is probably better than Holy Smoke for mine.
Really?
I liked this. I'm
not sure I'd agree with that. I thought her performance in Holy Smoke was very good, but it is interesting that it's set in Morocco for the whole duration of the movie. They don't have anything set in London.
No, there's nothing anywhere else. I thought Winslet was really, really good. I thought the character of the circus performer, Bilal, is it, in this movie was interesting as well, but probably not as... I was a bit disappointed with this movie in the fact that they didn't translate the Arabic scenes, so that when I watched this movie, I found that a little bit difficult. Because
what do you mean?
There was no subtitles or translation of the Arabic scenes in the version that I watched.
Well, I got subtitles, so yeah, maybe you watched a dodgy version.
I managed to get a single copy of the movie. It's on the Internet Archive, because it's not available anywhere else, except for YouTube.
But there's a lot of Arabic in this movie, and without subtitles,
there's a lot of Arabic.
Yeah,
so the subtitles that I had didn't translate the Arabic, so I found that a little bit tricky. Yeah, it was a good. Again, this was quite a good movie, but it had its moments. It was interesting seeing her working with children and playing like a motherly role. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, she was good at that, but the actual characters, I mean, she is so focused on what she wants to do, to seek enlightenment or something like that, and she does that. And basically she does that to the detriment of her own children, who she drags along with her against their will.
Yeah, very much so. I thought the performance of one of the young girls in particular, who's the one that goes off to school and sort of insists...
The older one.
The older one. I thought she was really, really rather good.
Yeah.
She did a good job. And then I thought that whole thing where she was like, the people who were looking after her while Kate and the younger daughter went off, and then all of a sudden they just disappeared and she was thrown out of the house and abandoned. And no one thought to try and inform her mother that,
It was the 70s, who knows what.
Different.
I think the expats that gather in a place like that are all a bit weird. They're certainly not normal people who might think about those sorts of things.
It got 66% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics. It was reasonably well thought of. So not a really highly thought of movie.
No.
Again, as we've mentioned, Esther Freud is actually a semi-autobiographical, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, she was basically the youngest daughter.
Yeah.
And this movie the story is supposed to have been told from the point of view of the youngest daughter almost.
Apparently Kate Winslet met her first husband, Jim Threepleton, who was one of the assistant directors on these movies. Bit of a love interest there. As opposed to poor old Matt Damon, Kate Winslet actually had to put on weight for this role. So she gained 15 pounds and dyed her hair brown for the role.
That's interesting. She received a lot of flack back in the 90s for her weight. But back then, if you weren't skinny
Well, the 90s were, the era of the ultra thin model. So Kate Winslet was definitely the opposite to that. And I think she's one of the pioneers of that whole respecting your body movement, which has become so much more important. And she's been an advocate for the way women are treated in movies as well. Apparently, she's a big supporter of the initiatives that have come into place in recent times where, for example, in sex scenes, they now have a thing they call an intimacy advocate, Jason.
Right.
They now have this role where this person is there to advocate for the two people who are having to do the intimate scenes and listen to their concerns. So Kate Winslet says in a lot of circumstances when she was very young, she couldn't speak up, there was too many people on set, or little things like her bathrobe being too far away so that when she finished the scene, she has to walk across set naked to get her gear on and that kind of stuff. So there was lots of little things like that, as a young girl, she found really embarrassing. So there's this role called the intimacy coordinator now, which helps particularly the young women in these roles, but also to advocate for their rights, I guess, and their opinions and that sort of thing. And Kate Winslet's been one of those people that was actually quite instrumental in that. She takes this kind of stuff fairly seriously. I mean, she gets her gear off in just about every movie I think I've watched of hers. It's just part of her getting into the role of her character. I thought the story of Bilal and how he sort of becomes into their life and then abandons them and then comes into their life and then abandons them. I found that a little weak, and it may well have been because I didn't have the translation of the Arabic, so I didn't quite know
perhaps
what was going on.
But I think also the story is constrained a bit by the fact that it is autobiographical. So the motivations of the characters aren't necessarily as clear as they normally would be if you're watching a movie that was written as fiction.
Yeah, that's right. There wasn't. This is probably a movie that could have done with a little bit of exposition, actually, like a voiceover over the top,
I think so.
To sort of explain what was going on in different segments.
I didn't even get why it was called Hideous Kinky from watching the movie. I don't know if they ever mentioned that, but it's because it's the two words that the young girls remember from when they were in England. And that just became their little catchphrase or something like that, didn't it?
Yeah, why it became the title of the movie or the book, indeed, I'm not really sure.
Well, it made it stand out because I remembered the poster that I saw 25 years ago.
Right. It kind of put me off the movie, personally. The name initially, and then I was like, this movie, it's one of these titles that doesn't really reflect the movie.
Not at all.
It
was the name of the book as well. And the author, like you said, is Esther Freud. And she's the granddaughter of Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
And then her dad is the artist Lucien Freud, who is obviously the deadbeat father that abandoned them and stayed in England that's mentioned in the movie.
Yeah, she had quite a life, if that's what her life was like.
Yeah, and apparently she returned to England when she was 16. So she travelled around for years and years with her mum.
So she was the younger of the two daughters?
She was the younger of the two daughters, yeah.
Right. I guess this is a movie that maybe doesn't age as well.
No.
Again, because of the way the kids are treated and the behaviour of the adults and that sort of thing.
I think so. They're very selfish, the adults in this movie.
Yeah, look, it's a movie it's kind of a movie of 1999, but also a movie of the 70s.
Exactly.
In a sense. Yeah, and I think this is best explained by the fact that Kate Winslet wanted to get as far away from Titanic as she possibly could. So she did. When I read that, it all sort of clicked into and made a lot more sense. It was like, that's why you're doing all these weird little movies, right? Okay. Because you want to get away from.
Yeah, and I think maybe the location is the most interesting aspect of the movie, the fact that it was shot in Morocco. And
I thought the scenes in the markets and all that kind of stuff were genuinely quite interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I found that fascinating. Yeah. Little sequences like the guy holding the little boy on his head. No one's really watching, and there's this dude doing this circus performance, and he throws the boy up into his head, and the boy just standing there, performing, and literally nobody's paying any attention to the poor kid. I don't know, maybe they were practicing or something, but I thought that was an interesting little section.
Well, there you go. I don't think there's much more that we can say about Hideous Kinky. I think the Kate Winslet connection is interesting, and the fact that it's similar in some ways to Holy Smoke. She's going off to find enlightenment. So interesting that there were two movies in the same year with the same actor. Where that was I think the crux of the story.
Yeah, interesting.
So there you go. That was Hideous Kinky. And I think now it's time for us to cut live to this week's movie night number 10. where all of our money is on number 22, or maybe number 11. Dana, give us 22. Over to you, future Jason. Okay, we're recording. We're live at the movie night, crunching on Doritos, and we're going to roll number 22, Jung. Everyone says 22 is coming out, so what is it? They're well mixed this week, and the number's out, and it's number 43. That's disappointing. Not a twin. It is Enemy of the State. Will Smith. A bit of a slappy movie, I think.
Satellite imagery coming through.
Roger that. Patch visual my location. Subject entering lingerie store.
Hi.
Hey, hi.
So you want some lingerie for your wife?
Yes. I'm not really experienced in this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm experienced. You know, I don't want to come in here and look stupid. Too late.
Yeah.
Should have gotten her a watch.
Robert Clayton Dean was innocent.
Freeze there. Times 10.
We have reason to believe that Mr. Zavitz may have passed sensitive materials to you.
What kind of materials?
Sensitive, sir.
Let's get into his life.
We have you bugged it, Mr. Dean.
Move to audio 3.
He was unsuspecting.
Hey, am I in the wrong house? Hello? Eric?
He was unaware.
You are the only woman in the world for me. You and Janet Jackson.
Coming your way over.
Now, what he doesn't know
I'd like to report a break-in.
could kill him.
Request immediate keyhole visual tasking, maximum resolution.
He's on your 6 o'clock.
You have something they want.
2 targets, rooftop.
I don't have anything. Maybe you do and you don't know it.
You're a threat now. To whom? Everyone you know.
Target's on the move.
A name, a phone number?
No, nothing. He didn't give me anything. You know how many federal agents you had following you?
Stay exactly where you are.
I want to use every means possible to get what we need.
From Jerry Bruckheimer,
Get the cat. What's the cat's name? Babe.
producer of The Rock,
Come here, baby. Baby, come here.
a film by Tony Scott,
Target is on 21.
director of Crimson Tide,
This about me.
20.
Do they know me?
19.
Who is they?
18. He jumped to 17.
Do they know me? I don't know what you're talking about.
Will Smith,
You're one of them, aren't you?
Former conspirer.
Switching, target switching.
Gene Hackman.
This man, this is our problem.
You live another day, I'll be very impressed.
It's not paranoia when they're really after you.
Tell them to stop it now!
Enemy of the State.
What the hell is happening? I blew up the building. Why? Because you made a phone call.
And that is paired up with Mickey Blue Eyes. Why is that in there?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're now accepting bids for lot number 84. Oil on canvas, dated 1870. La femme chez aube, which translates as a woman with massive bottom.
Michael Felgate was an Englishman in New York.
Just run normally.
I am running normally.
I guess I haven't seen you run before, and I thought you were doing a funny run.
Funny run. That's my run.
He met a woman he loved and bought a ring to prove it.
Who cares how much money, what you pay?
But Michael's pursuit of happiness is about to take a detour.
I can't marry you because of my father.
Dad.
Dad, I don't want to marry your father.
You will, Michael. Him and his friends.
So you meet everyone? Vinny, Carmine, and this is Uncle Vito.
Rent, Goodfellas, Casino, Godfather, 1, 2, 3.
It's a little favor, a tiny lie, and you're theirs.
Mr. Graziosi has sent over one of his son's paintings for me to auction. This unusual painting is entitled Die, Piggy, Piggy, Die, Die.
There are some men here from the FBI.
Good.
Have you at any time come into contact with anyone who you thought might be connected to organized crime?
Absolutely not.
Yesterday, Michael Felgate was an English gentleman. Today,
So, who's your friend? This is Mickey Blue Eyes.
Mickey Blue Eyes.
Mickey Blue.
It's me, Miggy.
What?
Hugh Grant,
Try this. Forget about it.
Hey, forget about it.
James Caan,
Get the hell out of here. Remember, no R's.
Get the hell out of here.
Here.
and Jean Triplehorn
You're one of the guys now.
in a romantic comedy you can't refuse.
I am not going to let anyone come between us. Not Vito the butcher or Vinny the baker or anyone involved in any kind of food preparation.
Mickey Blue Eyes.
But we got it under control. Forget about it. Why in the world are you talking like that? Shut up. I had enough of yous.
And there you go. Was it 22? I guess we'll never know.
We'll know soon. We'll find out tomorrow.
All right.
we'll wait.
If it was, I'm buying a lottery ticket for next week because that's just crazy. So any final words before we wrap this one up, Craig?
I think this was probably one of our stronger weeks in terms of movies that we watched.
In terms of the A movie, for sure.
I really enjoyed that little interlude movie, and I don't think Hideous Kinky was too bad.
No, not too bad. Interesting, but I wouldn't watch it again. Okay then, well, in that case, let's hand over to David and Margaret to have the final word as usual, and for now, that's goodbye from me.
All right, goodbye everyone.
Tom Ripley, Matt Damon, is a born con artist, a shiftless, personable young man, always on the lookout for a profitable angle. Like Patricia Highsmith's novel, this is an uneven film, especially in the latter stages where it takes too long to come to an unsatisfactory conclusion. But the first half beautifully captures the attraction of Italy in the 50s to rich Americans, and there are terrific performances, especially Philip Seymour Hoffman as an annoyingly observant acquaintance. Margaret.
But you see, I love the territory that this film covers. You know, the outsider pressing his nose up against the glass of the rich and glamorous life. Yeah. The fact that he wants to become Dickie. The fact that he does become Dickie. I just found it a most beautiful and gripping film. I'm giving it 4 stars, David.
Well, I thought the ending didn't work for me, so I'm going to give it 3.5.